Hello, everyone. Josh Gilliland here, one of the co-founders of the Legal Geeks. With me is Mark Zaid, and we're going to discuss Secret Invasion, Episode 3, Betrayed. Mark, how are you doing in our nation's capital?
It's been wet, very wet in the nation's capital for, I guess, like a good part of the Northeast, but DC has had a lot of water lately, but doing great. Good to see you.
We had that earlier, and right now it's been hot in the Bay Area, which is, normal summertime adventures for everyone. So let's jump into the big issues from episode 3 of Secret Invasion, which is quite the doozy. We're at the halfway point through the series. And if you could describe this with one word, what would it be, Mark?
Oh, wow. Oh, maybe perplexing. I'm still trying to figure out where I rate this series, because I kind of, maybe precipice. Maybe that's what I feel like we're on a precipice the whole time, where it could turn and just be awesome, or it could just crash and burn. I think we're like one episode away from either like, okay, certain things are being cleared up as we go along, 3 episodes in, which that was helpful. I'm glad to know that they weren't leaving us hanging, but there's still a lot of questions I have, and depending on how they address them, if at all, will determine whether this series was actually quite good or really stank.
Yeah, I have issues because it's painting all of the scrolls to be bad guys, which is
Other than one, two.
Yeah, which is a horrible message for refugees. Like, so the Governing Council of Scrolls has also kidnapped people, and they've been held in the irradiated part of Russia. Does that mean they're slowly dying? Like, how are those supposed to be like neutral to good if God knows how long that they've had, or people getting irradiated, including a head of state? That's just really weird storytelling of, can I like them, or is everyone a bad guy, which makes the issue of again, it sends a horrible message about refugees, which
Well,
is
even the one scroll woman who did not go along with the council, where you're like, oh, fantastic, someone has principles. Well, apparently not necessarily, because she stole whoever that person is and that person's identity and life away from them. So I guess it was one of the Nazis who tried to assassinate Hitler, halfway through the war, after being a Nazi for a whole bunch of years.
yeah. And them like, we're talking Operation Valkyrie, or in there were like 6 attempts on Hitler's life. Some of those guys wanted to sue for peace, to call it a day, like, we're done. What if they had put somebody effective in, like, who wasn't making insane decisions? World War II could have turned out differently if they had streamed the command control systems that they had, and not use the Me-262, the first jet fighter, to do ground attacks when it was supposed to be a jet fighter. That was all Hitler being crazy. What if they put somebody competent in? So yeah, it's a very troubling thought of, these were supposed to be the good guys, and even they've been kidnapping people and replacing them.
Yeah, I mean,
So
we have very little to obviously go on, right? We don't know what this council was, where they came about, how they came about, what the objective of the council was. Some of it just didn't make sense to me. It didn't make sense to me when they showed it at first, and the guy Gravik just goes there by himself with Talos's daughter. Was it Gaia?
Gaia.
And right? They're the bodyguards, and apparently, Gravik has clearly risen to a level of prominence, but all he is with this one young young scroll. And right. And he says, if I don't come out in an hour, shoot him in the head. It was just a weird, from a sort of security standpoint, seemed kind of strange to me. But we do now have the answer to the question that these scrolls have kidnapped the humans, that it wasn't, as we were postulating, that somehow over the last, from 30 years, 95 to 2025, that they created these identities and worked their way up into the hierarchy of NATO Secretary General, British Prime Minister, major right-wing talk show host, like a kind of Steve Bannon character. I'm not sure if the others were identified as to what positions they were, but they kidnapped. So, depending on obviously what countries were in place, you got kidnapping, you got false impersonation, you've got fraud. You can imagine, because we don't know how long they've been in these bodies or taken these identities, all the documents that they would have signed just in their everyday life that obviously would have been false. If they have spouses in those identities, their rape, actually, they're like all sorts of criminal activities that could have taken place. I don't know. Clearly there is a crime when you steal someone's mind and memories. I don't know if I doubt it exists on the books right now in our world. I would think in their world, knowing there are superheroes and aliens and stuff like that maybe that exists on the books. So, but I don't know what it is, but I'm pretty confident stealing someone's memories has got to be against the law somewhere.
Yeah, we can call it battery, and because that's
Certainly battery.
Yeah, we have laws on the books that will get it into the ballpark, even if we don't have something directly analogous to, you stole my memories, but you did log into my bank account, you transferred funds, you signed checks, you bought a car. Like, all of these actions would be criminally prosecuted. And so, yeah, there is relief that could be sought, but it's just like, wow, how do I like the scrolls, knowing that they've been literally replacing people, falling into some really funky, ugly tropes of, of literally refugees replacing people. Not a good message.
Yeah, well, and there's supposed to be a million that were brought over. I'm trying to think if they explained the timeline of when Talos sent the word out for the scrolls to come that Fury didn't know of. And I'm not sure if they gave a clear delineation of time. Though I want to say it was within the last 5 to 7 years, because for some reason I'm thinking it's somewhere around the blip time. But still, where are those million scrolls? And as you said, the only one we know, the only two that were good are Talos and his daughter, who now is deceased. Ostensibly, I guess we didn't technically see her die, but she got shot and presumably died.
And turn back to her scroll form. Unless she has extremis, then it's just a flesh wound and she'd bounce back. But
where are all the others?
Where are the others? And are there a million humans tied to machines? Or do we have scrolls just impersonating people living in Nebraska? Just doing their thing. Maybe they're farmers now, maybe, truck drivers, like, who knows? But they could just have some, off the grid job and are keeping a low profile so they can just live their lives safely and happy. Or are they in decommissioned missile silos?
Right, because we don't know, like, is Talos a U.S. citizen? Was he given U.S. citizenship for his service to the intelligence services? No idea. I mean, I have had clients who were double agents and defected to the United States from foreign countries, and were given social security numbers, and it was complicated. It is not easy in today's world to just create an identity out of whole cloth. I had some CIA clients. There are what are called NOCs, non-official cover. And I'm not saying anything classified. These are folks like Valerie Plame, who had a commercial identity, not a diplomatic one. So they didn't have immunity. They weren't they were case officers, but a very small branch. But they have, they had fake jobs. And the biggest problem I've had with some of these is that if they try and go to, once they leave government employment, when they try to go work in the private sector, if it's a private sector job that does background investigations, their job history just collapses so quickly. I mean, it is so easy to break through it, and it's a problem. So I can imagine with all these people, how do they just show up and create a life for themselves nowadays? If you want to go to if you want to do anything now, you need to have your cell phone tied to something, right? You just can't show up. It's difficult, but maybe we'll learn more about that in the next 3 episodes.
Yeah, they have been answering our questions, which is, this hasn't happened with one of these shows before, that we've been posing questions of, did someone become prime minister through 30 years of hard work? And the answer is no, she didn't. She replaced a PM who did. Okay, bad on multiple levels, but we have that answer now. So they are connecting dots for us that we are raising, but 1 million Skrulls living on Earth, unless they set up their own community or communities, throughout the planet, where maybe they're just living as Skrulls, it'd be really hard for them to blend in, because you need bank accounts and social security numbers, and go rent an apartment without one of those, and or get a job. So unless you're doing something that's just completely off the books, which is hard to do, it's difficult to imagine just someone posing as a Skrull, and they do gig work on TaskRabbit. Like it's just a really weird situation to have, because they wouldn't be able to form a business. So, but now we have an idea of what's going on here. So, which brings us to one of the things we raised last week with Fury married a Skrull. Surprise, love is love. We're not going to judge that validity, because there could be issues with that of interspecies marriages. But let's talk marriage abandonment, because that's a thing. Case law on this goes back over a century, where a court may grant divorce for an abandoned spouse if the offending spouse left the complaining spouse with the intention of abandonment, and the offending spouse remained away for at least 1 year. That's Texas Family Code section 6.005, and New York Domestic Relations Law section 170. And looking at a case from 1914, you had a farmer in Texas. They're married, and wife goes on a trip and decides, I'm not coming back to the farm unless you leave the farm, but I'm not coming back. And so while there were some attempts to reunite, the wife absolutely would not go back to the farm. And the court found that the wife abandoned the marriage and granted divorce for the now former husband. Or a wacky, wild one from New York from 1960, and it has some really weird dated language that we would not see in 2023. But a woman of Roman Catholic faith married a Protestant man in a Protestant church. And after the birth of a child and 3 years of marriage, the wife refused to recognize her own marriage or have sex with the husband unless they were remarried in a Catholic service. The husband said, no, thank you, and brought in action for abandonment. And the court explained, yeah, refusing to be married and have sex, which is part of marriage. And there's a whole long discussion about this. The court stated, quote, it is clear, therefore, that the plaintiff now before us is entitled to separation on the ground of abandonment unless his wife had good legal cause to refuse to have sexual intercourse with him. And as to that, it is equally clear that she had neither cause nor justification. Although it appears that she acted without malice and was activated by a deep felt and conscientious religious convictions, her motives were not sufficient in law to excuse the abandonment of her marital status. End quote. So I got a divorce because, case one, I don't want to live on the farm with you. Bye. Marriage abandoned. This, I don't want to have sex with you unless we get remarried in a Catholic church because I realize I'm really, really Catholic. And the husband said no. So again, weird cases, they exist. Fury going off to Saber after the blip. Now, let's postpone discussing the blip issue, but coming back and not spending time with his wife and just leaving to go into orbit. And it's been years, maybe 2 since post blip. That's not good. She could have a good case for abandonment because he literally left the planet. Mark, your thoughts on this bizarre fact pattern?
Of course, if they're even legally married, because that meant she would have had to have a birth certificate. I mean, not that he couldn't have one forged, clearly, given his position. And I'm not clear. I think I was trying to figure out, they're living in England, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's where all the scrolls are. It seems to be in Europe or so. Although they were in New York City in the 90s. So who knows? Anyway, yeah, Fury in the blip situation is still strange. I'm still trying to figure out, because every time they talk about the blip, it seems like the scrolls, at least the ones we're interacting with here, so to speak, they weren't impacted, which is fine. 50% wasn't, but it seems in their references that they kind of keep blaming Fury for being away during the blip. I'm not sure that's quite fair. But then he disappeared after that. And okay, I mean, and that's just hasn't been explained yet what the heck was going on, other than they keep saying he's different.
That, I mean, there's perhaps a PTSD element that he's the spy master who thought I should be able to see this sort of thing coming, be ready for it, because that's my job as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. or if S.H.I.E.L.D. was gone, full-blown spy master. This is what I do. But it is, I mean, it's like Thor had serious PTSD because of failing to kill Thanos. I mean, he got really close. If he had only aimed for the head, like he wanted to gloat as opposed to just doing a nice clean kill shot. If he just split the skull, it would have been done then there. But no, he wanted to, say like, I got you. Never gloat, just have your sniper do their thing and be done with it. But this, I mean, I could understand Fury having PTSD. I could understand a lot of people who could have been gone for 5 years, who like they come back and their spouse is remarried. Okay, you were technically dead. That marriage was over because you were dead. Like there's it's like in Spider-Man No Way Home, it's referenced that one of the kids doing the news broadcast for the school said something to the effect of, my younger brother is now older than me, which is like that. It would have to be obnoxious that, if you were 12, your brother was 10, and you come back and now your brother's 17, it's, or 15, like annoying. So again, the trauma I can understand, and mental health should be addressed, but just up and leaving the spouse and going, I'm going to outer space because the universe needs me, that's a tough one.
Yeah. As an aside, there's a French television program called The Revenant. Trying to remember what it translates. Return? Revenant? Anyway, they made it. It was an American version too. And as usual, not as good. But it had that same, these kids who were dead or people who were dead and came back to life, or came back to take their place among the living. And one of the scenarios was this one girl who died in like junior high school, came back to life, and the younger sister was now, several years older than her, because she was still the same age from when she died. It was very similar to like The Blip. They just come back like as if nothing had happened. So yeah, strange situation that we need more details about with respect to Fury, but PTSD could be, sure.
Exactly. And I believe the US version was Resurrection,
Something
and
like
that had the same showrunner as Agent Carter to bring it back to Marvel.
that.
But to bring this around to impersonating British naval officers for the intent of starting World War III. Impersonating a US service member is a crime. Pretty sure the Brits have something similar on the books.
Yeah.
That you just don't get to go cosplay as a British naval officer in order to start World War III. So a bunch of laws at play there, in addition to, again, use of nuclear weapons. Like we're clear that only the president can launch a nuke, or give the order for it. A Commodore in the British Navy deciding to give that order is very Goldwater, with his view that commanders should have the use of tactical nuclear weapons. Like that cost him the election in 1964. Like there was no coming back from the Daisy ad after after he said that. But yeah, clearly crimes being committed, and also means British naval officers have been kidnapped and are being held in an irradiated area where they could be slowly dying.
And they had their classified dossiers, so there's been more than just they're taking them. Usually, at least in the U.S. system, you don't have that kind of access even to your own security files. I have to represent people all the time trying to get access to their own personnel and security files. It's not easy. So there was a theft of classified information, and in the United Kingdom they have the Official Secrets Act, which pretty much criminalizes anything to do with the unauthorized disclosure or retention or taking of any type of classified information. They don't call it classified, as I remember. I'm looking to see if I wrote down. No, just I didn't write down what they actually call it, but it's a similar aspect of it. Yeah, and that, and you think about it from a storyline perspective, with all these Skrulls hiding out and impersonating everybody. Thankfully, for some reason they couldn't get two people on the sub. They were only able to get one person on the sub. So one guy refused to turn the key after the order got modified. You know, if they had had 2 people, it wouldn't have mattered, right?
But they had 3 on board, but it wasn't the chain of command. So it's
Yeah.
the XO was the replacement, and it was the captain questioning the order, which is again kind of a Crimson Tide situation
Right.
of it's like, hey, maybe you should authenticate that strike order because you can start a nuclear holocaust pretty fast and it's going to be automated. So don't do that. But boy, howdy, little wacky there. We then get to going after Commodore Bob. And we have the issue. There's a lot that happens with this. And we both have lots of notes on it. But Fury ends up taking the son as a hostage because Talos has been taken hostage to apply leverage to Bob in order to try to, 1, free Talos, and 2, stop the nuclear strike. That's bad when you
Not
start
a
using,
very American tactic.
no, using the
No.
kid as a human shield. Just I just a bad form.
I'm pretty sure the International Red Cross would object.
Yeah, it just, I understand we want to stop a nuclear holocaust. I get that. But he's willing to cross lines that should not be crossed. And then
And I'm not sure at that time, did they know he was a Skrull
yes.
by the time they took the son?
They had to be guessing on Junior being a Skrull, but it would make
Right. No indication that he was, but that was kind of weird then for Bob to play along as if he cared about presumably the human son, especially since and I wrote a comment about what horrible OPSEC, operational security, it was, where Fury and Talos are talking about their names in front of Bob, and then I'm like, then I realized he was a Skrull, and I'm like, oh well, he knows who these guys are, so there's no operational security violation. But then it doesn't make any sense. Why would he give a damn about the kid?
Unless the entire family was replaced by Skrulls. So, which is,
I'm not even sure. I mean, they seem to be so dedicated to their mission first, that a little humanity, so to speak, even though they're not human, seems a little out of place.
yeah, it's why would you compromise the mission by placing family members at risk too? So it's like deploying with your kids. That just seems like a really bad plan, but apparently they did, and thus that gave Fury leverage to go after Junior, who, like a human kid, was playing video games, doing his thing. So again, it's just messy and weird with how they handled that. And then we just full on turned to torture of Bob. I did a TikTok about this because normalizing torture just bothers me immensely. They end up shooting Bob in the thigh. Now, we don't have the anatomy of a Skrull, but Skrulls do bleed out like human beings. One shot can kill a Skrull. That could be a fatal wound. It's like you could bleed out and die there. And when they're not able to get the information they want, and Talos starts questioning, when the daughter's threatened, Talos just kills Bob, and they don't get the information that they need to stop the launch. So this is now just a revenge killing after torture. And it's just, I get it's a spy story, but man, that's just so messed up and doesn't seem helpful to the mission. It's like you now have a corpse that you tortured and you got nothing for it.
And the mission, of course, being the genocide of the human race, which is what the Skrulls want, or at least Gravik and his group are leading towards. And of course, genocide, and thank God, in the aftermath of World War II, with the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, international treaty, it was issued in 1948 and entered into force in 1951. And genocide, whether committed in time of peace or in time of war, is a crime under international law, which all contracting parties to the treaty have to undertake to prevent and to punish. Now, it's what's called a jus cogens crime. I think I talked about this before when we were talking about maybe genocide in the first episode. I think there was a reference to it, or war crimes. It's a crime by which no nation can deviate. Now, of course, the problem with this is that the Skrulls haven't signed on to this treaty, so the treaty is meaningless as far as that. And by the way, genocide would mean killing members of the group, like humans, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, or deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Now, most of these types of treaties have also been implemented in different jurisdictions in each contracting state. So in both the United States and in the United Kingdom, and of course, this is happening in the United Kingdom territorially. In the US, 18 USC 1091 prohibits genocide. And there actually is extraterritorial jurisdiction if an American were committing genocide anywhere in the world. And in the United Kingdom, the International Criminal Court Act from 2001, although maybe it looks like it was amended in 2014 from when I have a note, is you can't commit genocide, a crime against humanity, or a war crime outside the UK by a UK national, a UK resident, or a person subject to UK service jurisdiction. So there's a lot of crimes in this episode because it's all mostly in the United Kingdom that takes place that would be subject to a variety of laws here. If they wanted to even make the argument that this was part of a genocide, a conspiracy to commit genocide, if in fact the UK authorities were able to find out about the genocidal plans of the Skrulls who were trying to become super Skrulls, which we heard another whiff about in this. I tell you what, I was more bothered by Fury so casually killing British guards at the commandant's house, or whatever position this guy was. I forget. What was Bob's position?
A Commodore.
Commodore. So, I mean, there's no indication that any of those guys were Skrulls at all.
That's super disturbing.
And you know, this gets back to what we've been talking about in each of the episodes, that it's unclear what Fury is. Is Fury and Talos just these rogue two guys just doing stuff? Does Fury have any type of authority? The storyline seems to indicate he has no authority whatsoever. So the fact that he killed these guards, there are US laws that actually could apply to him, because some of it looks, I think you can make the argument that there was actually hostage taking, that they took the child, the kid, the son. I don't know if the kid had a name. I think they might have said the name, as I recall. They took the kid as hostage, and then they sort of took Bob as hostage too. And there was torture. So 18 USC 1203 is hostage taking where death results. And because the offender, Fury, was a US national, the US has jurisdiction over him. Of course, the Brits have jurisdiction over everything that takes place in the house. And then there's also 18 USC 2340A, which is resulting from torture committed outside the United States. And that also is where a US national is the offender. So Fury could potentially be subject under a couple of different codes there, sections there. If he had diplomatic immunity, then that's a different story. Then he'd be PNG'd, persona non grata, and just exiled, sort of deported outside the United Kingdom. But the United States could still and would be expected to prosecute him for commission of the crimes in the United Kingdom.
I really do hope those guards were scrolls, or if they weren't scrolls, there was at least non-lethal force, like if it was a taser to knock him out. But if he killed humans, there's really no good coming back from that. And in speaking with his wife, where he said, "I'm retired and I want to take up revenge," again, that's just really bad. I mean, like we're teetering on, there's no one to root for, other than we don't want World War III to happen. But it's a very frustrating, story, because the scrolls went from victims to genocidal maniacs. That's not good. Even if it's just the leadership, still not good. Sends a horrible message. The good guys should not be butchering people. Bad message. Just a horrible freaking bad message for what's happening. And I mean, like, it would be one thing if they called in, a strike on the British sub, that they just, the only way to stop World War III is to kill all these British sailors because the sub's compromised, because leadership has scrolls trying to start World War III. That's a hard call, but at least that's service members, and they, you do sign up that you don't necessarily come home. Like they theoretically could understand, but still, you don't want to go there. Like, you just don't want to start killing innocent people and killing the guards. It's like it's not a it's not a forgivable sin.
Yeah, with no hesitation, right? Those were kill shots from the get-go.
So bad.
So yeah, I was a little surprised at that. Because you didn't see, there were things that were troubling along the way, but it was mostly the Skrulls doing it to humans, or the humans doing it to Skrulls. This was a lot different. I was also and we don't have the details on Sonia yet, the MI6 operative, right? I'm still a little unclear as to what she is position wise. And she makes a cryptic reference. First of all, she gives the address of Bob to Fury, which I'm still trying, is a little bit confusing, because they're sort of on the outs, but yet she's, she says she's busy with this other thing because she was looking at, I guess, the 3 guys, or one of the guys that got from the sub, right? Was that the folder she was looking at?
Yeah.
When she said, well, we have a problem of our own, but yet this is a bigger problem because Bob's the guy who's controlling the order. So I'm not quite sure why she's not focused on that, because he's the bigger fish of the one. But she made this cryptic reference to Fury about that the butcher shop had been compromised while she was in the midst of like having her fun or whatever, which was pure torture and illegal torture. But she said it as if Fury knew about the butcher shop, which there's nothing in the storyline that would show he knew anything about it. And that just raises more questions in my mind. What the heck is this relationship between MI6 and SHIELD, or this woman and Fury, to explain what was going on? Because the one episode where we really saw them interacting was she didn't trust him. And now all of a sudden that she seems to be trusting him with information that's pertinent to British national security. Little bit strange.
Yeah, and she references she has her own problem to deal with. Does that mean she knows the PM's been compromised, or is there something else in the chain of command that's a problem that she's aware of? I don't know. It's a very hard to follow situation.
Yeah, I mean, and that may be what we were talking about earlier, that we'll learn more about it to tie up some of these loose ends. I imagine this isn't the last time that we've seen Sonia.
No. It's just no. Now, you identified a bunch of other issues as well. with the Skrulls helping Fury dating back to the 90s, and how they helped him rise up through the ranks. Apparently being very off books, which means what kind of budget did Fury have for, how are they all getting paid? So just a lot there. But
There's just a lot. Well, again, we don't. It's referenced them being like his invisible covert team. Is this a Fury operation? I mean, there's a exchange in the car before they go in with Bob between Talos and Fury, where Talos is basically lecturing him, sounds legitimately, about Fury rewriting history, and that, hey, look, if it weren't for us, we stopped those terrorist attacks because we got you the info, and we're fine with having helped you, and you climbed the ranks. We helped you sabotage adversaries, which, I'd love to know more about that, because that could be illegal depending on what they were doing, and other covert operations that they did. And it was almost as if like they were doing this, and maybe the US government didn't know that that's how Fury was doing it. He just had a network of people, but he would have been junior back at that time. So he's responding to somebody or reporting to someone. So exactly what was going on with respect to the US government running these Skrulls, and how did that, obviously the Brits became known about it. They knew about it at some point in time. How far did the Skrulls become known? And what was their status? And now we got 19 became a million. And again, what was going on between that time? And what was the US government doing to go back to our contract question that we were talking about in the first episode, I guess, with respect to the promise to find them a new home? Was that on Fury, or was that on the US government? We don't know. And then the woman who became his wife was working for him. And so we have the romantic coffee or pizzeria scene. I forget where they were, in New York City, where she has taken on a new identity of a very attractive young African-American woman who Fury had not seen before, and he was taken by it physically, and she seemed to have intentionally done that to find a shape or figure or a persona that he would find attractive, and was suggesting a sexual relationship, to which he first said, no, we have rules about that. And that's true. In the federal government, there are rules, especially in the military, with respect to relationships with subordinates. But that could also be in civil service as well, could be a problem. But then she made this comment of, well, we don't actually exist even on the books. Remember that, Fury? Meaning this is a covert team that nobody knows about. So we're not real. So, i.e., we could have a physical relationship. And clearly that was the argument that won out over time.
Yeah, I just don't marry your direct report. Like, that's just, they shouldn't be your direct report anymore. Like, that's just bad mojo, asking for trouble. So, crazy. Now, we have Talos confronting the Skrull general, and we do get a peek that he has Extremis from Iron Man 3, and also a really good run in the Iron Man comic for that does healing of the hand after getting stabbed through the hand. What other enhancements does Gravik have? Because that could be very super scrolly. Who else has been enhanced? So just future problems that we're going to see come in. And yeah, so just but we get the great line of humans are the most formidable when they are threatened. It's like the alleged Yamato quote of we have awakened a sleeping giant and have yet to feel his wrath. Like,
I mean, I wrote that down because that line just hit me. I'm just thinking, how many times did I read something similar in a comic book story or hear it in a science fiction movie involving aliens? Yeah.
oh,
And I can't come up with any examples off the top of my head, but this this is such a common theme within comic books and science fiction to explain how we always come out on top.
yeah, I mean, there are a lot of war stories pertaining to Americans when you push us to the brink, and there's historical evidence to that. Battle of Samar, which was told brilliantly in The Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors, where 4 destroyers take on the largest surface warfare fleet ever assembled. And I think all but one of the destroyers ends up on the bottom, but the fleet turns away. So like they fought like hell. So it's normally in the like, don't tick off the Americans because they will go after you. Uh Seeing that applied to the entire human race, that yeah, how will the humans respond to an attempted genocide on their entire race? Not well. Post blip, there's probably a very low tolerance for alien incursions into the planet. uh I don't see that ending well. So and that deal to find them a homeworld, probably dead. Like, you don't come back from that. uh let's talk about the end scene,
Yep,
because
the cliffhanger that left us to whatever will happen the next episode.
yeah, so you picked up on the voice, and I rewatched it again, and I couldn't tell. But who do you think the voice was?
Well, it sounds like him, and then since hopefully no one who listens to these hasn't already watched the episode, so we're not spoiling it. I think people were writing and saying it online that it's Rhodes, it's Rhodey. And it is his voice. There's no doubt. It's definitely his voice, the actor and character. So, we saw her take 2 calls. One when Fury was in the kitchen, which they gave no indication of who she was speaking to, other than she said it wasn't an important call, but obviously it was something clearly. And then this one, but it wasn't just that she was talking to Rhodes. That by itself would probably actually make sense, given she's Fury's wife or partner, whatever it might be, and obviously the relationship that they all would have had and the role she would have played of being part of his covert operation. But it was that she wanted to deal with Gravik, and the caller said, no, you're dealing with me. So that meant that, or raises the question, is Rhodey a Skrull? Or is there something else going on here that is even bigger than we're envisioning with respect to the relationship with Gravik and the like? I don't know. Maybe they're trying to get rid of the Russians with Gravik, and Gravik is betraying them and actually wants to exterminate all humans and not just the Russians, which the Americans want. I mean, we don't know yet. I'm sure we'll find out.
It also raises the issue that Fury states, I think, to Sonya, the spy master, about a high-ranking American in England who's a Skrull. So he might suspect Rhodey is a Skrull, because who else was he talking about?
Yeah, because otherwise, I would say it's treason, but it's not, because as a matter of law, treason is the only crime that's actually defined in the Constitution And the way it has been defined in court requires for the American to betray their country during a time of war. And as far as I know, in this timeline, we're not at war with any particular nation. In any event, we're dealing with Skrulls. So unless the president issued a secret executive order, which he could have, and maybe Congress could have acted on it to declare war, treason would not be a prosecutable offense under that fact pattern. If Rhodes is a human and he's dealing with Gravik, there could be a whole bunch of issues. If Rhodes is a Skrull and he's dealing with Gravik, then we're back in the same situation of the council members and who else they're infiltrating. Although it raises, I guess, some questions. I mean, if they've infiltrated and taken the identities of all these key people, why the heck they need Gravik to figure why Gravik is becoming the leader of what they were doing when he's not anyone, by way of human figure, human stature. So it's a little strange. Like what the heck has he done that all of a sudden he has amassed so much power to literally displace the Secretary General of NATO, the Prime Minister of England, and other top people, Skrulls, but people with real power.
Not only that, the ruling council would have displaced those individuals prior to Gravik's takeover. It doesn't make sense, or at the very least, it makes the governing Skrull council
completely weak.
Yeah, and
I mean, what authority do they have? Who are they governing?
Yeah,
if Gravik just walks in and takes over. I mean, I'm thinking like Putin and Prigozhin now. Is Gravik Prigozhin coming in and taking on Putin, though Putin won that one, at least for now. So it's a little strange.
Yeah, but cancer might win with Putin, so we got that to hope for. But it is weird because those world leaders would have been compromised prior to Gravik's takeover.
Sure.
Like that doesn't make them good guys or neutral or repressed people if they're taking on world leaders prior to Gravik's tenure, because at least that would make sense of we're going to start bumping off world leaders and put them in a position. And at that point, why not just have the British PM give a launch order for nukes? Because you don't need to take over a sub. You just need to give the order for the sub to launch.
Well, that's the whole question. What was the purpose of the governing council? At least, what is the purpose of a governing council for them to take over key human beings, where think of all of the work that these guys had to do in their day job. I mean, how are they even getting away for them to be in the same room together for meetings? Doesn't anybody know where the British Prime Minister is and the NATO Secretary General at the moment?
Do they have a transporter system?
Yeah, how are they getting there?
Because those are long airplane flights, and you don't get from New York to Russia quickly. England's still 5 hours like from New York. It's a long freaking flight. World leaders just can't take off time, nor a talking head who has a broadcast time. And you can't say, hey, I'm going to Russia for a few days in the middle after a terrorist attack.
Right. And nobody would recognize them as they're traveling.
And even
Madam
if they
Prime Minister, what are you doing here?
Yeah, even if they traveled as somebody else, just a Joe Blow.
I guess, yeah.
I mean, it's like, look at a magazine from the 50s and go like, I'll look like that dude. And then they can fly. But again, you still need a passport. So there's that half of it. a transporter system or their own aircraft would make sense, but you still have the incursion issue of you just can't get from point A to point B surprise style. Like they're like it's a really, really weird thing. So yeah, I mean that's it. I'll still stay up late to watch it. This
Well,
stuff
yeah, we'll see. Maybe this will all be explained.
yeah, I mean one of the redeeming qualities from the comic of the same name was that Fury had safe houses all over the world. And he was armed and ahead of the Skrulls and hanging out in little bunkers doing his thing. And that goes back through Civil War as well, that he was spy master, smart, in hiding. This, he did have a nice car and storage that he went and got out. But I have really mixed feelings on how this is going. I want it to end strong. Do they, in the comics, there was a period where the Skrulls were all stuck in the form that they had been in. Coming up with the weapon that turns all the Skrulls back to their natural form would be helpful in this, because then you would figure out who's a Skrull or not a Skrull pretty fast. And you got to get Harrison Ford as president too. So you got.
Well, I hope at some point in the next 3 episodes, just as a tip to the hat joke, at least one Skrull becomes a cow.
Oh, they have to do that.
So at least one has to become a cow.
It'd be weird not to do that. I mean, the fact that they worked in Super Skrulls, even though not the powers of the Fantastic Four, because those characters haven't been induced on 616 yet, but still, it's a clay duck. They can't miss that shot. So yes, this is a perplexing series. I do love it. I want to see how it goes, but man, there's a lot to unpack each time with how. So, or I hope
we shall see.
We shall see. So
Same
with that,
bat channel, same bat time.
Yeah, and next one will be the pre-Comic-Con recording. Maybe we could record at Comic-Con, so we in person. It'd be weird. Crazy talk. Because you, Stephen, and I will all be there. So we could literally hang out, have pizza or chow mein. We could pick the meal and literally record. It could be really fun. That said, so everyone, here we can now go public with our panels. So the Legal Geeks have 2 panels at Comic-Con. Thursday night, 7 p.m. Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Lawsuit. We're going to look at all the great issues with Indiana Jones over all the films, and that's going to be a wicked good time. Then on Saturday night at 7 p.m., we have Lawyer Mania, where we will jump into the legal issues from Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Can't wait. It's going to be fun. And Mark, you have your own panel, and then you're on, in addition to one of our panels, you're on another panel as well on JFK. So could you tell us about
it? I am on the Indiana Jones panel for the Legal Geeks. And then I have my panel on From Cave Art to Superheroes, where I talk about comic book history and social commentary. And that is, I think, Friday morning at 10 a.m. And then I have a third panel to talk about the JFK assassination in comics, which is Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. And that should be pretty interesting too.
Awesome. Can't wait. And we don't conflict time-wise, so we can actually go to each other's panels.
Yes.
Miracles happen. So everyone, you're going to Comic-Con, say hi. Be nice to hang out and talk to folks. And until then, everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay geeky. We'll see you all very soon. Take care.